Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka and we are back again with another Twitter thread. Today we're talking about hype. Frequently, when new cards are released, players will overhype them, proclaiming certain archetypes to be the next Zodiac. Sometimes players will underhype them, expecting decks that are good overseas to flop here, or vice versa. But sometimes, there's just nothing generated about new cards at all. Pack filler turns out to be game determinative, and the community only picks it up after a couple of months of legality. Today, I am asking you, which cards flew completely under the radar and were later discovered to be broken? I'm going to begin with one of my own Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. This card released with all the new fun Link support, and no one played it for months until the first person read Deskbot 001. Let's see what you all came up with. Akemi says, this card on release was $3. Ice Dragon's Prison is maybe the card with the biggest price jump in modern memory. We all thought this was ass, and then one guy played it, and then it immediately shot up to $40 where it stayed for like a year. Lady Alexa says, until it started putting up OCG results, literally everyone I saw was convinced that the adventure cards were not good because we were all looking at them as a dedicated deck. It wasn't until the OCG lists that people realized, oh wait, you don't actually have to play the field spells. Yeah, I can forgive people for this, but at release, pre-OCG, people thought that these cards were not very good. And that's because they are a dedicated strategy with a bunch of equips that do nothing and a bunch of field spells that do less. It turns out if you just play the good cards in a better deck, they're crazy. This is most likely because Pote had like 9 broken-ass cards from the get, but there's a bunch of cards from that set that I had not heard a single word about until they released. Gurikara Divine Carnate is a card that's powerful now, but at release people were like, yeah, I don't know why you'd ever play it over Nibiru. And Melfi Wally is like one of the most powerful legacy support cards ever printed that I did not hear a word about. Swag says, ignored for years, the OG. It took us like a decade to figure out this card was good. It was good on release. Did you know that this card can copy Independent Nightingale? Pendulum Magician FTK was arguably the best deck of February 2018. Admittedly, Heavy Metal Foe's Electromite was the missing piece to make the FTK more consistent, but it took the mind of Noah Bagelman to piece it all together. Yeah, this was like a rare in a set that people just completely forgot about until they realized, no, wait, you can set up 8,000 points of damage exceptionally easy with this card. Onibi is a great example, just pack filler common in Battles of Chaos. Did you know this card is like 6 months old? When it released, people were like, oh yeah, whatever. And within a year, it was a cornerstone of the best deck in the format. However, there is one person who was correct about Onibi. Dire, roll the footage. Context, in Coder Court, I've been telling everyone to buy as many of this card as they can. It was 2 cents and each of us bought thousands of it for $20. It's gonna be a good card in Splights. Not game-breaking, but still decent. It's now 10 cents, so we've doubled profit. We'll see. She bought like 1 million of these cards at like 2 cents. Absolutely correct. When Pote came out, he was already severely overlooked. People thought at most he'd be played in decks that already play Super Poly. Turns out that's not the case. It forced decks to play Super Poly in what is one of the best ways to break a Spright board, not getting into what happened in Ish-Tier format. Garua came out in the same set as Tearlament monsters, and people were like, yeah, it makes Super Poly maybe a little bit better, but the card's already okay. I don't think this will change the math on anything. Chat, absolutely correct. There's an argument that this is the card that made Tier better than Spright during Pote format. Speaking of cards sort of overlooked by Pojo originally, definitely took a while for Maxi to pick up steam, at least in the meta-dominant hand trap it would become. Let's read this. Oh god, I miss when people used to talk like this online. Guy with his senior picture named Dark Paladin. Maxi opens the week, and this thing is so rare because level 2, Earth Attribute, Insect Monster, 500 attack, 200 defense. There isn't a whole lot to do with this card, honestly. You draw a card each time your opponent special summons a monster. 1.5 out of 5. Next we have Fizzjawl's Pikachu with Ash's Hat. Hopefully you all had a good time at the store sneak. We're starting off the week with a highly sought after card Maxi. It's not the shiny black kind. Instead, it's the card that turns into a lot of draws. Chain it to the opponent's summon of Quick Draw to draw 2, one when Fluffies come, and another for the summon of Drill Warrior. Gateway of the 6 activated, you're drawing anywhere from 3 to 5 cards. It's crazy. You might not want to main this card. Against some decks, like Gravekeeper's Watsu Karakuri, there won't be enough special summons to go around and steal from. Remember that Maxi doesn't give you a draw for the first summon. This is kind of fucked up and wrong. You need to look at the first summon and predict what will happen next. You either draw a few cards or mess with your opponent's plans. Like Effect Veiler, Crow, and Skullmeister, you can toss it at any time. Use it to your advantage. 4 out of 5. Damn sorry, Dark Paladin, you got cooked on this one. Like half of Phantom Rage as a pack. Absolutely correct. Yeah. If you go back and look at the archetypes released in Phantom Rage, it's like Virtual World, Tri-Brigade, Meowmoo is in here. At release, people were like, I'll skip this set. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. At release, the Kaiju didn't have a ton of hype because people were thinking them as like their own dedicated deck. Now, keep in mind these were following up the success of the TCG exclusives like Burning Abyss, so they were kind of expecting they would be really good. The other TCG exclusive this released alongside was Cosmo, but once people started conceptualizing them as like, here's a dark hole, these are removal spells, the community really warmed up to them. Before then, people were like, this is a waste of cardboard. Yeah, part of this is my fault. I thought that Runic was a cheesy deck that went for an alt-win condition and deck out that you would never achieve. Did not realize that it being 30 instant fusions was probably good enough for it to be the focus of a tier 1 deck. I actually was not paying attention at the time. Did people think the spirits were actually playable? Because they were. On release, they were the focal point of a deck in 2014 that Doug and Jeff Jones and Lucas Peterson all took to really impressive finishes. Got released during the Link era and consequently mostly ignored. Yeah, release people were like, oh, there's maybe a format where this card's okay, but like Link monsters are good enough that you would probably never find space for it in your extra. Now it's like the main game plan for some decks. The Tearlament archetype, correct. At release of Power of the Elements, everyone was just talking about Spright, 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 Spright. That's because it followed several months of the OCG in which Spright was the literal only thing worth playing, with a near 100% representation rate at high levels of tournament play. Spright was still very good here, but after about a month, a combination of a different ban list and a couple of pros doing a lot of work to break the archetype led people to recognize that actually Tearlament was maybe a better deck. And what was seen over there is this like big gimmick in the OCG. Here was seen as a competent competitor to Spright, and in many ways it's superior. Then the Ishizu's released, and there was just no more discussion about it because obviously Tear's crazy. Donner, yeah, pretty much absolutely no hype whatsoever. Responsible for that top 4 in EU for Runic Furhire. It's like a staple in almost every sideboard right now because it's just a generic removal spell. Yeah, people just didn't talk about Borrowland at all. It was in there and people were like, oh, you know, this is Borrowland. It's like the only thing Dragon Link does anymore. Adamancipator, period. Yeah, I don't understand. No one thought this deck was going to be remotely playable. There's an old Simo video where he calls it like rogue at best.
I know. Simo was wrong. Hey, guys, I'm aware. Yes.
I'm realizing a lot of these prompts don't take off as much as I'd like, and that's because they're a little more difficult. You know, they require you to have a working memory and a brain that hasn't been just perforated by reading Farfa's chat over and over again. But I appreciate those of you who did have good answers. That's right. Both of you. Didn't read the prompt. Here's my answer. Dire, leave this in. Don't you dare.